listener production.
Just a quick heads up, this episode discusses mental health and suicide, which might be triggering for some. If that's not for you today, we hope you can join us next time. Hey, Tara Cassidy with you, and welcome to The Briefing. There's a career in Australia that's leading to the death of 3 Aussies a fortnight.
He was in effect discharged with no job, no home and nobody, just discharged. ADF are absolutely disgusting in the way they treat humans. Don't enlist until this is fixed. And people say to me, Julie-Ann, you're playing with our national security. No, I'm not. You're just going to let them die anyway. So to you, to the ADF, humans are a replaceable asset. Kill one, get another one. Don't enlist until it's fixed.
That chat with the mum of a former Australian sailor who took his own life is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, here's the headlines straight from the Listener newsroom this ANZAC Day, the 25th of April.
Thanks, guys. Well, Australians have gathered on ANZAC Day dawn services across the country this morning. Major General Burr speaking at the Cenotaph in Sydney's Martin Place, honouring our fallen soldiers and recognising the younger generations learning our nation's history.
Today will be your first ANZAC Day dawn service. Some of you are young Australians, some of you are new to this country, while others may be joining us after being inspired by the many women and men who have selflessly put service ahead of self.
Well, New South Wales Premier Chris Minns delivered a poem reflecting on the sacrifices made by our diggers.
You who have loved will remember the glow of their glad young years as you stand today to salute them in silence, with pride and with tears.
Services have also gotten underway in Brisbane and Melbourne, while the Prime Minister and opposition leader are in the nation's capital. PM Anthony Albanese paying respects at the Australian War Memorial.
At this hour, upon the 25th of April in 1915, ANZAC became one of the immortal names in history. We who are gathered here think of those who went out to the battlefields of all wars but did not return.
Commemorative marches will also take place in Melbourne, Brisbane and Adelaide. The nation's RSLs are also said to be packed today, with Aussies to take part in traditions like a game of two-up. Well, there's plenty of traditional sport action today too. AFL fans going to the ANZAC Day clash at the MCG are being told to arrive 3 hours early. It comes as security screening ramps up after 2 men were charged for allegedly bringing guns into the stadium a few weeks ago. Overseas, Donald Trump has called on Vladimir Putin to get a peace deal done with Ukraine, the US president declaring he's not happy with Russia's strikes on Kyiv overnight, which has killed at least 12. And the Pope's doctor has spoken about the pontiff's death, saying Francis passed away without suffering at home. It comes as thousands head to Italy ahead of the funeral set for the Vatican tomorrow.
Thanks to the Listener newsroom for those headlines. Next up is My Deep Dive, looking into the ongoing issues in the Australian Defence Force, a career that's leading to innocent men and women taking their life every single week, and what we need to do to stop it. You can listen to that up next.
I was an average kid, went to school in Adelaide, and my father was in the RAF up in Malaysia. While I was up there, actually, I met a few sailors. So as the sailors were coming through, I heard a lot of stories, and a few of the stories were pretty exciting and fun. And so that sort of influenced a little bit of my decision to join the Navy in the first place.
That's the voice of David Finney, a sailor who proudly served 20 years in the Australian Defence Force before he was medically discharged in 2017. He spent years travelling to war zones, witnessing refugees, often children, who he described as being on the brink of death, among other atrocities.
My moral compass was knocked consecutively year after year after year in such a way that I think my value or my ability to feel safe was slowly damaging. You know, I'd met the kids that had lost their family on the beaches in Suai Bay. I'd met the kids that had been shot in Bougainville. I'd met so many refugees, and I'd been on all these boats, and I don't think any of it is helpful or good for a human soul. And I think by the time I'd completed that deployment, that was the one where I think I came home and I was a little bit different.
Due to his time in the ADF, David's mental health deteriorated and was only made worse in 2007 when he lost his baby boy to sudden infant death syndrome, only adding to his already mounting PTSD. And in 2019, just over a year after speaking of his inspiration for joining the ADF on veteran podcast Life on the Line, David took his own life. Since then, his mother, Julie-Ann Finney, has been fighting for change within the Australian Defence Force and fiercely advocating for the thousands of military members who've lost their lives to suicide, just like David, who Julie-Ann says the ADF should have done more to save. Julie-Ann, thank you so much for joining me on the briefing. At the Royal Commission, you spoke about what David witnessed in the ADF and the loss of his son to SIDS and how that impacted him. Are you able to share with me what happened?
I don't think that I started with that as a starting point. David was with the refugees before that. He had issues before that. This was just another thing added. And one of the things that made me a little bit cross, if you like, was that, of course, Defence tried to blame David's death completely on the death of his son, and that was just not the case. It was another way to cover up how Defence do not handle mental health issues, how they destroy those who serve and then discard them. So I wasn't having any of it. So although I had to say that affected David greatly, and nothing, of course, affects you more than losing a loved one. Nothing. I'm in that position. There were things that broke him that he absolutely could not live with, and he didn't get the help he needed.
Do you mind sharing with me some of the things that you learnt about what he witnessed in the Defence Force?
There were occasions of his own personal safety in certain places where at one stage the other side, if you like, had barrels of acid and were telling him he needed to have a drink with them. And, you know, there were times I read through something he wrote, and at the end of every paragraph he wrote, I did not know if I would survive. But the worst thing for him was seeing the families, the refugees, not being allowed to interfere because there's so many. So if you have a piece of food that you don't want, you can't share it because there's just too many. You cannot interfere. They are on the boat to be taken somewhere. They are on the boat to be watched, and there is no humanity in what we do. For him, there was no humanity, and watching the children was the hardest.
Do you think the loss of his son played into how much that those kinds of things did affect him? And I remember you speaking about this one instance where David was at CPR training that also really affected him.
So he started to cry, and he was just having a flashback of doing CPR on his own baby son. And it was very difficult, and he cried, but we don't allow emotions in so many places. And he was called a soft cock and told to get on with it by his commanding officer. I mean, seriously, there is no humanity in Defence. They say they're changing, but they're not. In fact, I actually did CPR training around the same time as a civilian, and I couldn't do the resuscitation on the baby model. And I'm just grandma. I don't know how my son dealt with that, because it was just an absolute reliving the nightmare of trying to save the life of his son.
Mm. And I remember you speaking about the fact that the ADF would often say their personnel are their family, but really did not treat them like such in the moments that mattered. And one of those moments being where David had tried to take his life and had been admitted to psychiatric care at times, and that the ADF knew that, and yet there was something that occurred with them while he was in care.
It was awful. This kills me to this day. So the ADF made my son get out of a hospital bed and put on his uniform triggered to charge him. Now, I don't have those charge papers, whether it was the fact that he tried to take his life or whether it was an alcohol charge, but he had to walk over the gangplank in front of all his mates, sobbing to be charged. And, you know what's wrong with this is not just that they did that to my son, but they also did it to the person that had to lay the charge. Because in the ADF, if your brothers and sisters see you in distress, they will stand by you. But the policies, the legislation, the institution of defence does not. And so even the person that charged David that day, I believe, would have mental health issues knowing the outcome of what he was ordered to do.
And am I correct in saying that David was also medically discharged while he was in psychiatric care?
That's correct. ADF are absolutely disgusting in the way they treat humans. It's just unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. And although he had friends and family to go to, Tara, he was in effect discharged with no job, no home, and nobody, just discharged to a whole different life that he did not know how to live. He wrote some blogs and they're quite incredible to read. And the last one was, I think, 2 weeks before he died. And he said, now time is for me and I'm going to spend time on me. And then he died. That is a little bit confusing coming from me, but what I'm trying to say is we do get confused when people are suicidal. It was a psychiatrist who said to me, do you think that we know when somebody's going to suicide? And the answer is no, because we'd save them all. We would save them all if we knew. But did Defence do the best it could with David? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Do they do the best now? No, it still goes on. I'm still sticking by people who are not doing well and Defence just lets them go. My gosh, they should ring me this week and they should say, who do we need to save this week? And I'll give them 3 names straight away. 2 are serving, 1 is ex-serving. I need a platform to say, until this is fixed, don't enlist. And people say to me, Julie-Ann, you're playing with our national security. No, I'm not. You're just going to let them die anyway. So to you, to the ADF, humans are a replaceable asset. Kill one, get another one. Don't enlist until it's fixed.
And at the commission, you also spoke about David's funeral. You'd contacted the Defence Force thinking or hoping it might have been like those American movies, I think you said, where you see this huge defence presence. But instead you got a very different response.
I wonder what would have happened, Tara, if they wrapped me up in cotton wool, but they didn't. Nobody that could helped me. I thought that they would present me with a flag. Turns out that flag should have been the Navy ensign, and I was told that if I could purchase one, they would fold it for me and present it to me. As an afterthought, they did present me with a flag, and I'm not angry about this because it's human error, but as they presented me with the Australian flag, it had the wrong date on it, a date that meant nothing. But then I have to say, and I just want to be completely honest, the person who had the date wrong did call and apologise, and another flag was presented to me sometime after David's death. But seriously, on the whole, this felt like it wasn't important to any institution. Doors were closed on me all the way. Give me some help. I'm sorry, he wasn't serving. We can't. Give me some help. I'm sorry. That's just not what we do. There was nothing. And so here I am, and I'm still fighting, and it shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't be this difficult. 6.5 years on, I'm still fighting for a voice. I'm still saying, don't you dare enlist. Don't let your kids go there. They will be destroyed. They will be discarded, and life won't be very good.
And just for clarity there, when you mention about the date that was wrong, that was the wrong date of David's death that they'd put on the flag.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, earlier we started talking about the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide, which you really helped campaign and petition for, I understand, Julie-Ann. You sat in on the hearings and heard a lot of the evidence and the stories. What did you learn about the things that need to change within the Defence Force? I understand one of them surrounded a group of ex-service and defence members that consult with the Department of Veterans Affairs, I think called ESORT.
First of all, we need independence everywhere. I've got a petition going at the moment. If you look it up on change.org, it's called Disband ESORT. eSort is decades old. They are mostly old men that have had the same solutions for decades. They haven't worked, and yet government is still listening to them. So I want this group disbanded and replaced with lived experience, grassroots veterans, and subject matter experts. This needs to happen. We can't be listening to men who aren't qualified in this area. They're not psychiatrists, no more than I am. They don't have lived experience. They try to tell stories of, I knew someone who was depressed once. This is not depression. This is destruction by service. And this is something that needs to be looked at in a completely separate matter to all other illnesses. Get rid of the heads of ex-service organisations who are allowed to have so much say. I don't want them to go away, but certainly they shouldn't have the say that they have. The other thing is that we need a completely independent body, independent from government, from defence, from the Department of Veteran Affairs, and from those ex-service organisations, like RSL, Legacy and Soldier On, where someone can go when they have issues of policy or legality or bastardisation or sexual assault or any of those things, somewhere where people can go. You can go to your mum. She loves you more than anything. You can go to your dad. He loves you more than anything. You can go to your family. But we need somewhere to go, somebody who can look at what's available and get immediate help. And Defence could then keep their members within the services. Remember, years ago, they used to do 20 years. Now they do 4 years, 6 years. They could keep their members if they just looked after them.
And Julie-Ann, today is ANZAC Day. Is it bittersweet to see people coming together and rallying around our veterans on this one day a year when there's this ongoing, unaddressed issue going on within Veterans Affairs?
It's wonderful. We commemorate the sacrifice of so many and their families. And today, I'm watching that all around me, and it is wonderful. I don't want that to stop. But talk to me tomorrow, because I don't get to forget any day. And there's 3,000, and that's from the Royal Commission, possibly more than 3,000, that have passed away by suicide since 1997. And we're not getting any closer to lowering the weekly numbers. We're not getting any closer, regardless of what the government says it's doing and regardless of how much money the ex-service organisations get. As I said, we're funding business models. Put me in there. Let me meet with the next Prime Minister, because I need to tell him that his ministers are not working.
And I think I read it was 3 veterans a fortnight that we were losing to suicide. And it's such an important issue to be talking about and to keep shining a light on. So, Julie-Ann, I really appreciate you coming on to share your son and your story and for continuing to fight on this issue. So thank you so much for joining me on the briefing.
Tara, we need action, not words. Thank you so much for having me on. I do thank each and every person who serves or has served for their service. Thank you.
Julie-Ann Finney speaking with me there, the mother of former Australian sailor David Finney, on the ongoing issues within the Australian Defence Force and how it's contributing to veteran suicide and poor mental health. And a reminder, if this episode raised any issues for you, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Briefing. If you found it interesting, we would love it if you could share it with someone else who you think might too. Or you could check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, and on TikTok and YouTube, search Listener Newsroom. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.